Hi, I'm Silas. My wife died giving birth to our son. He was rushed to the NICU, barely breathing. I was alone. I texted my whole family, "Please pray." And all I got back was my brother saying, "We're on vacation in Hawaii. Handle it yourself." I said, "Got it." And I did. I handled it. But when he needed me, a month later, I answered. That was my mistake. Because what came next, what I uncovered, wasn't just betrayal. It was theft, silence, and the kind of truth that doesn't set you free. It burns everything down first. It was 3:12 in the morning when I realized how quiet a hospital could be. Not peaceful quiet, dead quiet. The kind that presses against your ribs and makes you hear your own pulse. The NICU doors stood a few feet from me, the glass windows reflecting rows of lights that buzzed low and steady. The floor smelled like disinfectant and burnt coffee. Maeve was gone. The doctor had said something, words like, "We tried," "hemorrhage," and "I'm sorry," but none of it stayed in my head. What stayed was the sound the monitor made when it went flat, that high, constant note. It followed me out here like a ghost that wouldn't stop humming. I sat down outside the NICU, hands clasped, trying to feel something through the numbness. The nurses moved around me, gentle, quiet, all in soft blue. One of them nodded toward the glass. "He's strong," she said. "He's fighting." I looked through the window. My son, tiny, pale, a web of wires and tubes, lifted his chest just barely. His fingers twitched. My throat tightened, and before I knew it, I had my phone out. In the family group chat, the cursor blinked on a blank screen. I typed, "Please pray." I stared at those two words. They looked small, desperate. I hit send anyway. Seconds turned to minutes. The screen stayed on, seen by 3. No reply. I refreshed. Again. Nothing. The silence started to sting. Not the kind that fills a room, but the kind that fills your bones. It was as if every second without an answer pushed me a little deeper underwater. I leaned back in the chair, shut my eyes, and tried to breathe through the emptiness. I could still smell Maeve's shampoo on my jacket, the one she wore when we drove to the hospital. She'd said, "Don't worry. He's coming early, but we'll be fine." We weren't fine. The phone buzzed at 3:42. I looked down, hoping for something human. Maybe a, "We're here for you." Maybe just, "We love you." Instead, "We're in Hawaii. Handle it yourself." It was from Rhett, my brother. I read it twice. The words didn't make sense at first. Then they did too much. I waited for something to rise inside me, anger, disbelief, but nothing came. Just this hollow, widening quiet. I typed back 2 words. "Got it." My fingers hovered over the send button. I didn't think. I just pressed it. The blue bubble shot upward, and that was that. I set the phone face down on the chair, beside me, and stood up. The nurse met my eyes through the glass and opened the door. "He's still fighting," she said softly. "Yeah," I managed, my voice low. "He gets that from her." Inside, the machines clicked and hissed in rhythm. I sat in the corner of the NICU, beside 2 chairs. One empty. The other held my jacket and her hospital bracelet, white, bent, marked with her name. I picked it up, turned it over in my palm, then folded it once and slipped it into my pocket. That empty chair stayed beside me. Every time a nurse passed, every beep, every breath, it reminded me who wasn't coming. Hours blurred. The sky outside started to gray, cold light seeping through the blinds. I hadn't moved much. I just watched the small rise and fall of my son's chest, counting breaths, half afraid they'd stop if I looked away. Somewhere behind me, a janitor mopped the hallway. A coffee machine hissed. Life went on. That hurt the most. that it could. I stood, walked to the glass, and whispered, "You're not alone, kiddo. I'm right here." For the first time, his fingers twitched again, like he'd heard me. My phone buzzed once more on the chair behind me. I didn't turn around right away. I wanted a few more seconds inside the stillness before I faced whatever waited on that screen. When I finally looked, the new message previewed across the top. Rhett Donovan, call me when you can. I didn't open it. The sky had started to pale, a thin line of light stretching over the hospital parking lot. I placed my hand on the glass between me and my son, the warmth of my palm leaving a faint mark. The air shifted. Somewhere deep inside, something small but sharp began to burn. Not anger yet, but the kindling of it. The second message came at sunrise, and that's when the silence started to burn. The sun came up like it didn't care. I sat in my truck in the hospital parking lot, watching the light crawl across the windshield. The phone was still in my hand, Rhett's name on the screen, that unread message glowing like an accusation. I didn't plan to call him back, but I did, maybe out of habit. Maybe because silence feels heavier when you're the only one carrying it. The line rang once, then went straight to voicemail. His voice came on, bright, rehearsed, casual. "Hey, this is Rhett. We're in Maui till next week. Leave a message." The word Maui hit harder than I expected. I waded through the tone and said, "She's gone, Rhett. She's gone. Nothing else. Just that." I let the phone stay at my ear a moment longer, listening to static. Then I ended the call. It felt like hanging up on the world. 4 days passed like one long hour. I went through the motions, signing forms, answering nurses, standing beside my son's incubator while he fought for breath. Every beep from the monitor sounded like a question I couldn't answer. The doctors said he was stable, but the word didn't comfort me anymore. Stability just meant you hadn't fallen apart yet. The funeral was scheduled for Friday. December rain had started early, the kind that seeps into everything no matter how tight you wrap your coat. The chapel at Salem Memorial was small, maybe 20 seats, and still felt too big. 6 people came, none of them were family. I set 2 chairs near the casket, one for me, one for Rhett. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted proof, something physical to look at when the pastor talked about love and family. During the service, I couldn't keep my eyes off that empty chair. It sat there politely, legs even on the floor, waiting for someone who never planned to show up. When the pastor said, "Family is what holds us through the storm," I almost laughed. If that were true, then why was I sitting alone? The rain tapped against the stained glass window, soft but steady. People murmured the usual condolences. I nodded through them, shaking hands that didn't know where to squeeze. The flowers wilted fast in the cold air. After the closing hymn, I stayed seated. Everyone else had filed out except the pastor, who hovered awkwardly near the door. "She was loved," he said. "She still is," I replied, though my voice came out thinner than I wanted. When I stepped outside, the rain had turned to mist. The world smelled like wet earth and car exhaust. I checked my phone, no missed calls. But a notification blinked from social media. I shouldn't have opened it. Rhett's wife, smiling in a sundress under palm trees. Caption, "Family time in paradise. Grateful for blessings. A drink in each hand. Ocean behind them." I scrolled once, maybe twice, then locked the screen before my stomach turned. Inside the funeral home office, a woman in a gray cardigan asked, "Will your family be joining the paperwork, Mr. Creed?" I shook my head. "No, it's just me." She hesitated, pen hovering. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you, I said, though the words felt metallic in my mouth. By the time I got back home, the sky was the color of steel. The house smelled faintly of Maeve's lotion, lavender, and something warm I could never name. I set her photo on the nightstand, next to the folded hospital bracelet. For a long time, I just stared at both, as if waiting for one of them to move. The silence there wasn't like the hospital's. It was fuller, heavier. I could almost hear the echo of her laugh bouncing off the walls. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at my phone again. Still no calls. I turned the ringer off and laid it face down. I didn't want to see another tropical sunset. The clock ticked through another hour before the vibration came, a short buzz, then another. I almost ignored it, but something in the rhythm made me pick it up. Not Rhett this time. The screen showed the hospital's number. For a second, I couldn't breathe. My thumb hovered over the answer button, afraid of what waited on the other end. Mr. Creed? It was Dr. Hanlon, her tone calm but too deliberate. You should come now. My legs moved before my brain caught up. I grabbed my coat, the keys, the bracelet still sitting on the table. The doctor's voice hadn't been urgent, but the words that followed changed everything. When I got to the hospital, the halls were almost empty, just the quiet rhythm of shoes on linoleum and the hum of fluorescent lights. I half ran, half stumbled through the NICU doors. My breath came out sharp in the cold air. Dr. Hanlon met me at the desk, hands clasped, her tone softer than I'd ever heard it. He's stable, she said. Your son's breathing on his own for the first time. For a second, I couldn't speak. My chest felt like it might collapse under the weight of it. Then she smiled, small, tired, genuine, and I followed her to the incubator. Noah looked impossibly small, but stronger. His skin had color again, faint but there. I pressed my palm against the glass. She would have been proud, I whispered. He's a fighter, the nurse said, tucking a blanket around him. He gets that from her, I replied. It was the first time in weeks that warmth found its way into me. Not much, just enough to remind me what hope felt like before it froze over. Then the phone in my pocket buzzed. I pulled it out, expecting another update from the hospital or maybe a message from a distant friend. But it was a social media notification. I almost ignored it. Then I saw the name, Jenna Donovan, Rhett's wife. The post began with, Rhett has been such a rock for our family through this difficult time. Please send prayers for his brother who's struggling to cope. Attached was a picture of Rhett holding a candle, his head bowed like a man carrying the world's sorrow. Hundreds of comments poured in beneath it. You're such a good man. Bless you for being there for him. Your brother's lucky to have you. Lucky. My throat went dry. I stared at the screen until my reflection blurred across it. Rhett hadn't called, hadn't shown up, hadn't even texted when Maeve died. But here he was, our family's saint, the hero in their story. I scrolled further. Someone wrote, You've always been the strong one, Rhett. He'd replied with a prayer hands emoji. I nearly laughed out loud. There was a twisted brilliance in it. The world believes the one who speaks first. I didn't comment, didn't text him. I just sat there beside my son's incubator, the hum of machines surrounding me, the glow of the phone lighting my hand like some cruel joke. After a few minutes, I locked the screen. My heart was beating faster, but not from grief this time. Something else had begun to rise, something colder, steadier. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed in the hospital until the nurses changed shifts, then drove home through slush and wind. The house was still, the heater humming low. I poured myself a glass of water and sat in the small office Maeve used for her bookkeeping. The lamp's yellow light fell across her framed diplomas, the stack of unopened sympathy cards, and the laptop I hadn't touched since the funeral. I opened it. The screen blinked to life, empty but waiting. I started typing. Not a message, not a post, just the truth, laid out in dates and screenshots. The night she died, the unanswered texts, the funeral, the photo Rhett's wife posted. Every entry was a way to make sure I didn't forget. How silence can be dressed up as virtue, how absence can wear a halo when you let it. I remembered Maeve once telling me, "You always try to keep peace, even when it breaks you." Back then, I'd thought it was a compliment. Now it felt like a diagnosis. Maybe peace was just the name we give fear when we're too tired to fight. The cursor blinked at the end of a sentence. I saved the document and sat back. The house creaked in the cold. Snow brushed softly against the windows. On the desk beside me, the NICU bracelet caught the glow of the lamp, its white band now dulled, edges curled. It looked fragile, but it hadn't broken. Neither had I. The phone vibrated again. I didn't move at first, then I glanced at it. The family group chat had lit up. The newest message read, "So proud of Rhett. He's handled everything with such grace." For a moment, I thought about replying, about finally saying what needed to be said, but I didn't. I leaned back, eyes on the ceiling, and whispered, "Not this time." Because peace doesn't always mean silence. And silence, I was learning, can be the loudest kind of truth. The next morning, I found out what they'd done with her paperwork. I had gone in early, thinking it'd be a short errand, just a few forms for Noah's birth certificate, maybe some insurance paperwork. Nothing complicated. The kind of thing I thought I could handle again now that the fog was lifting. The hospital admin office was tucked into a corner on the first floor, behind the cafeteria. It smelled like copier toner and burned coffee. A woman at the desk greeted me with a polite smile as she flipped through a manila folder. "Hi, I'm here to pick up the birth documents for my son, Noah Creed," I said, trying to sound steady. She typed for a second, then her brow furrowed. "One moment." She tapped a few more keys, then looked at my ID. Her voice dropped, hesitant. "Sir, there's been a change." I blinked. "A change?" She rotated the screen slightly toward me. "The listed father on file doesn't match your ID." I gave a dry laugh. "There must be a mix-up. It's me. I'm the father." She hesitated again, clearly uncomfortable. "The file was updated 3 days ago. It says here, the listed father is Rhett Donovan." The name punched a hole straight through my chest. "What?" I leaned in, my voice dropping. "There has to be a mistake." She double-checked the digital entry, then pulled out a printed copy. "It shows it was changed by a family representative. They signed as next of kin." Rhett? I stood there, the document burning in my hand. That name printed under father of child might as well have been in flames. The clerk started to explain the correction process, something about filing a challenge. I didn't hear most of it. My blood was pounding in my ears, and all I could think about was that text. "We're in Hawaii. Handle it yourself." Turns out he'd handled it. Outside, the winter light was sharp and white. I walked into the parking lot and sat behind the wheel of my car, paper still trembling in my hands. It wasn't just a clerical error. This was deliberate, a quiet theft. Rhett hadn't shown up to the funeral, hadn't called when she died. But he'd found time to sign his name on something that never belonged to him. I looked down at the document again. He's not the father. Not because it was true, but because now it was on paper. And paper had power. At home, I didn't go straight inside. I sat on the porch steps, letting the cold bite through my jacket. That paper still clutched in one hand. In the other, Maeve's bracelet, small, white, curling at the edges. I looked between the two. The bracelet, with her name printed cleanly, was fading. The document, with Rhett's, was fresh and sharp. Not anymore. I went inside, sat down at Maeve's old desk, and turned on the laptop again. Opened a new folder. I titled it Paper Trail. It wasn't rage driving me now. It was something colder, clearer. This wasn't just neglect anymore. It was rewriting, replacing. And I wasn't going to let it stand. I took photos of everything. His name on the form, the timestamp of the update, the clerk's business card. Everything went into that folder. Not because I knew what to do with it yet, but because I was done pretending silence kept anything safe. Later that evening, I went back to the NICU. The nurses smiled when I arrived, and one of them gently updated me on Noah's vitals. He looked better than ever, breathing steadier. His fingers twitched a little when I placed my hand near the glass. I leaned down close. "They tried to erase us, kiddo," I whispered. "Let's make sure they can't." I sat beside him for a long time, just listening to the hum of machines and the slow rhythm of his breath. I didn't check my phone until the shift change buzzed overhead. A message lit up the screen. From Rhett. "Call me. It's important." I didn't even flinch. Instead, I pulled out the document and laid it beside Maeve's bracelet on the ledge. Then, I took a photo. One image. Truth and theft, side by side. The next time I saw Rhett's name, it was printed under mine on a check. The check came in a cream-colored envelope, the kind you expect to hold bad news from a bank or some dull legal form. It had the hospital foundation's logo on the corner and a thank you typed neatly across the top. Inside, a letter printed on thick stationery. "We're grateful for the generous donation made in your family's name. Your support helps NICU families across Oregon." I almost tossed it aside until I saw the check. 2 signatures at the bottom, mine and Rhett's. I hadn't signed anything. There was more. Paperclipped to the letter was a glossy printout from the hospital's newsletter. "The Donovan family supports NICU families in need." The photo underneath showed Rhett smiling like a polished politician, shaking hands with one of the hospital board members. He wore a blazer I'd seen before, probably borrowed from some campaign fundraiser. Behind him, a banner. "Hope begins here." My breath stayed calm, but something behind my ribs went rigid. The man who hadn't shown up to Maeve's funeral, who couldn't text back when she died, was now the face of mercy and brotherly love. I dropped the letter on the kitchen counter and just stared at it. For maybe 5 minutes, maybe longer. It felt like hours in my bones. After a while, I moved to the garage. Maeve used to call it my fortress of junk, but lately it had become more of a bunker, where things made sense because I arranged them that way. Boxes of baby gear, unopened, legal pads stacked in one corner. And now, a small cassette recorder I dug out of a drawer last week, sitting square in the middle of my old workbench. I turned it on. The quiet hiss filled the room before I hit stop. Something about that sound. It felt grounding, like the start of something real. I pulled up my voicemail history and started scrolling. I wasn't sure what I was looking for until I found her voice. Maeve, a message from 2 days before we rushed to the hospital. I hit play. "Hey love, just checking in. Rhett said he can help with the insurance paperwork if you're too wiped. I think he means well. Don't stress. It'll get sorted. I'll pick up soup on the way home. I played that line 3 times. He said he can help with the paperwork. The timestamp? Same day the birth certificate was altered. I hit record on the tape deck. Labeled the tape in black marker. Tapes 01. Truth. It didn't feel like a smoking gun, but it felt like a string. A thread leading back to the point when things began to slide sideways. I wasn't building a case yet. I was building memory. One that couldn't be edited with a keyboard or whiteout. Later that night, the rain returned, soft against the metal roof, the hum of Oregon winter. I sat in the half-dark garage with only a desk lamp cutting through the shadows. I pressed record again. They think silence means weakness, I said aloud. It means I'm listening. There was no audience, no need to perform. I wasn't trying to sound brave, just clear. I started laying out the paperwork. Hospital forms, bills, Rhett's message history, that damn photo. I took pictures of everything, labeled each file with the time and date. I wasn't going to share them, not yet, but I wanted them documented before someone tried to rewrite that too. The cassette clicked as it kept turning. I found myself watching it spin slowly, like a clock counting down. Every click a reminder I was still here, still in it. For the first time since Maeve's heart stopped, I didn't feel hollow, not healed, not even okay, but focused. I slid a fresh tape into the recorder, marked it Tape 02, the meeting, even though the meeting hadn't happened yet. I didn't know what I was planning, but I knew I needed to be ready. I was packing the tapes away in an old shoebox when my phone buzzed again. Message from Rhett. Family dinner this weekend. Everyone's coming. You should too. Not, I'm sorry. Not, let's talk. Just dinner. I held the phone for a long time, reading the message over and over. I imagined him at the head of the table, another speech, another toast, more performance. I didn't text back. I just pressed record. Let's make sure they remember this one. I parked 2 houses down from Rhett's. Didn't want my car on his driveway. Didn't want anything of mine too close to whatever version of reality he was staging inside. The neighborhood looked like something from a magazine. Manicured hedges, subtle uplighting, symmetrical trees, the kind of wealth that doesn't shout, but whispers just loud enough to be heard. From the sidewalk, I could see the windows glowing. Warm, soft light spilling onto the lawn like it belonged to someone who earned it. Laughter drifted out faintly. Not wild laughter. Measured, tasteful, polished. I walked up the stone steps slowly, each one heavier than the last. Before I could knock, the door opened. Rhett. He smiled like he was waiting on a photographer to say cheese. Well, look who made it. You invited me. I didn't think you'd come. His tone wasn't surprised. It was smug, like he'd baited a hook and I bit. You look tired, he added, stepping aside. You holding up? Getting there, I said. Inside smelled like pine and catered roast. The foyer was trimmed in garland. Every picture frame glinted under recessed lighting, and on the wall near the dining room, a new addition, was a black and white photo from the hospital gala. Rhett, shaking hands with a board member, a plaque in his grip. In honor of baby Noah Creed. Underneath, Donovan Family Endowment. I stared at it, not for the way they'd used Noah's name like branding on a wine bottle, but for the way my name had been ghosted completely out of the picture, literally and figuratively. They didn't just steal the moment, they scrubbed me from it. Rhett clapped my shoulder. Pretty good turnout tonight. Big hearts in this room." I didn't answer. My hand brushed across my pocket. Tape recorder still there. I wasn't sure if I'd use it, but it comforted me just knowing I had it. Dinner was served at a long mahogany table that probably cost more than my car. Jenna stood at the head, all pearls and posture, and tapped her glass. "Before we eat," she said with that sweetened drawl she used when cameras were on, "I just want to thank everyone who supported Rhett's NICU initiative. It's meant the world to us." Applause, glasses lifted, the glow of self-congratulation thick in the air. I didn't clap. I kept my eyes on Rhett, who smiled through it, avoiding mine. Then, someone down the table, an older woman with too much perfume, asked, "Isn't that your brother's baby's name?" Jenna gave a practiced little laugh. "Oh, it's all in the family. Silas preferred not to be involved." That sentence hit like a belt across the spine. Quiet, measured, lethal. The room chuckled politely, as if that explained everything. I set down my fork slowly, my jaw clenched, but I didn't speak. Not yet. After dessert, the guests drifted to the patio with wine and coffee. I lingered near the entry hall, watching the plaque again. It hadn't moved. It just sat there, broadcasting a lie. Rhett found me by the hallway. "You could have said thank you," he murmured. "For what?" I asked. "For keeping Noah's name alive? For giving him a legacy?" I laughed once, bitter and short. "You mean your name, your face, your speech? That wasn't legacy. That was theater." He raised an eyebrow. "Come on, Silas. You weren't in a place to handle any of it." "True," I said, "but that never gave you permission to take it." Rhett sighed, as if I was being unreasonable. "You didn't want visitors. You shut down. Someone had to step in." I stepped closer. "No. Someone had to wait, to grieve, to respect. You saw a gap and filled it with a spotlight." His eyes narrowed just slightly, the media smile slipping. I didn't raise my voice, didn't gesture. I just whispered the truth. "You hijacked my grief, and you did it in Noah's name." He looked at me for a long second, calculating, then said, "You always were the emotional one. And you," I said quietly, "always knew how to lie without using words." He tried to pivot. "Let's not do this here." I leaned in. "Oh, we already did. You just weren't expecting me to show up." Before he could answer, I turned and walked out the front door. I didn't slam it, didn't make a scene, but I made sure to brush my coat sleeve across the plaque on the way out, just enough to smudge the glass. The glass gave a faint squeak as my sleeve grazed it, just enough to blur Rhett's face in the photo. I didn't look back, didn't wait to see if anyone noticed. I just stepped into the cold night, letting the damp air cut through the wool of my coat like it had something to prove. 3 days later, I was standing outside the NICU again, just before dawn. Rain tapped on the curved glass awning like it had nowhere else to be. Everything about that morning felt like déjà vu, except something was different. The donor wall. I stopped cold. Where my name used to be, etched just above my son's in clean serif letters, Silas Creed, in honor of Noah Creed, was now a gold plate that read, "The Donovan family." Noah's name was still there, but mine had vanished, like I never existed. I pushed through the automatic doors, the whoosh of warm air doing nothing to thaw the chill inside me. The front desk nurse, a younger woman I didn't recognize, looked up with a hesitant smile. "I need to ask," I said, trying to keep my tone even. "Who approved the name change on the donor wall?" She blinked. "I'm not sure. I think it was authorized by a family representative. Something about anonymity." "Anonymity?" I repeated. Yes, that's what it said in the notes, that you requested to remain unnamed. I just nodded once. Didn't argue. Didn't cause a scene. What was the point? Inside, I walked to the same incubator I had stood by every day for the past month. The hum of machinery. The faint beep of monitors. The rise and fall of Noah's tiny chest, still tethered to more tubes than skin. I placed my palm against the glass. You're still here, I whispered. The rest didn't matter. Around mid-morning, as I sat with a coffee gone cold in my hand, my phone buzzed. Rhett. A text preview popped up on the lock screen. Answer me. It's bad. My stomach dropped. Those were my words. The exact ones I had sent him weeks ago when Maeve's heart stopped and mine shattered. Back then, he never answered. Now he was calling in the same language. I hesitated, thumb hovering, then finally tapped out. What happened? His reply came almost instantly. Dad's in the hospital. Stroke. We need you here. I stared at the message, not for what it said, but for what it pulled up from the pit of my gut. That split second where my heart wanted to race, where the ghost of the old me, the good son, the peacemaker, rose to the surface. But then came the silence I remembered, the voicemail I'd left Rhett. Please pray. The call that rang unanswered while my world imploded. I locked my phone. For an hour, I sat in the hospital cafeteria, watching people shuffle in and out with bagels, charts, and tired eyes. Nurses joked quietly. A janitor wiped down tables. Life moved on. Eventually, I drove out of the parking garage. Halfway down I-5, something shifted. The road blurred under the weight of wet sky. The kind of day where the clouds didn't move. They just sat heavy over everything. I pulled onto the shoulder. The engine idled as I leaned forward, resting my head against the steering wheel. Then I looked up, into the rear-view mirror. What I saw wasn't anger. It wasn't heartbreak. It was clarity. You don't owe them that version of you anymore, I whispered. Not the version who ran to every call, who forgave before the wound even scabbed, who let silence be taken for consent. I turned the wheel. 30 minutes later, I was back at the NICU, back where the only heartbeat that still mattered to me echoed steady through a wall of glass. Later that evening, I sat at home, sorting through old photos of Maeve in our early days. Her laughter still lived in those snapshots. It was there, smiling between the creases and pixels. She never would have let them do this. My phone lit up again. 17 missed calls. 4 voicemails. I played the last one. Rhett's voice was raw, angry. You heartless bastard. He could die. And you're not even here. Silence followed. Heavy. Bitter. I deleted the message without listening to it twice. Then I whispered to the room, the way I once did in a voicemail Rhett never answered. Now you know what it sounds like. Later that night, I sat beside Noah again. The nurse came by, her voice gentle. He's stronger every day. I smiled. Just a little. So am I said. Before she could respond, my phone buzzed again. An email. Subject line. You'll regret this. From Rhett. I didn't open it. Not yet. Because regret has its own clock. And his was ticking. I let the phone slide back onto the table and didn't touch it again that night. The words had done what they always did, slithered into my ribs, looking for guilt to grip. But there was none left to take. A week passed. Portland remained gray, frozen in that stubborn late January silence where the sky never really brightens and the air smells faintly like cold metal and wet leaves. Every morning, I followed the same routine. Coffee, hospital, home. No more side trips. No more answering calls from names that once meant something. On Thursday morning, the email came. Subject: Recognition Ceremony, NICU Donor Board Presentation. It was one of those glossy, templated invites with fake gold borders and a little banner. With heartfelt gratitude to our community. The list of honorees sat at the bottom like a punchline. Donovan Family Foundation, Major Benefactor. I blinked. No mention of me. No reference to the early check I'd written when Noah's NICU stay first began. No sign that I'd even been a part of it. It didn't sting this time, not in the same place. The burn had moved deeper now, to a place where pride had gone quiet but hadn't died. I pushed back from the table and rubbed my face, trying to ground myself. That's when my hand brushed against something on my wrist. The NICU bracelet. Still there, faded, curled at the edges, nearly translucent with wear. I hadn't taken it off. Couldn't. Maeve's name was still visible in tiny block letters. Maeve Creed. Below it, barely legible, was the barcode. Just a smudge to anyone else. But to me, it was a thread. A last breath encoded in plastic. Something made me lift my phone and open the camera. I hovered the lens over the barcode and let it scan. A second later, a link opened to a secured hospital record. And there it was. Patient, Noah Creed mother, Maeve Creed. Father, Silas Creed, admission, December 18th. Updated December 21st. Record altered by family representative. Rhett Donovan exhaled through my nose. No smile, just stillness. Like a puzzle had clicked into place, not to show a picture, but to reveal who'd been stealing pieces all along. I stood up. The bracelet, once a grief-soaked remnant, had spoken. Not in mourning, but in proof. That evening, the ceremony was already underway when I walked into the hospital auditorium. Strings of white lights draped the ceiling. Waiters moved like shadows between tables, balancing trays of red wine and tiny hors d'oeuvres. The audience applauded politely as Rhett took the podium, his suit tailored, his smile preloaded. "Tonight," he said, voice smooth, "we honor the families who understand that compassion is action, that truth." I didn't wait for him to finish. I stepped into the light, steady, silent. All heads turned as I walked up the center aisle. I wasn't invited, but that never meant I didn't belong. "Let's start with the truth," I said. Rhett froze, mid-sentence. Cameras clicked. From my coat pocket, I pulled a small USB stick and handed it to the tech at the projector. The screen behind Rhett flickered, then flashed to the birth record. Father, Silas Creed. Change made. Rhett Donovan. Date, December 21st, 2:13 p.m. Gasps swept through the room. A few people turned toward Rhett. He reached for the mic. "There's been a mistake," he said, voice suddenly tight. "The hospital system, sometimes it logs the wrong credentials." I shook my head and pulled something else from my coat pocket. The cassette recorder. I pressed play. Maeve's voice filled the auditorium. "Rhett said he'll help with the insurance paperwork if you're too tired. I think he means well." The silence after was the kind that made even breath feel loud. I looked at him then. Really looked. Not at the mask, not at the fundraiser smile. At the man who watched my partner die and still tried to rewrite what she left behind. "She trusted you," I said. "So did I. Never again." Then I walked off stage. No applause, no fight. Just footsteps. Quiet and sure. That night, I sat in Noah's room. Outside, the storm was breaking. Rain against glass like fingertips drumming truth into the night. I didn't check the news. I didn't need to. My phone buzzed like a live wire all evening. By 10:30 p.m., the headlines were up. Hospital suspends. Donovan Foundation amid record tampering allegations audio confirms maternal consent forged in NICU records. Brother betrayal, a family foundation. Cracks in public. Jenna deleted all her social media posts by midnight. Rhett's office released a vague statement about clarity forthcoming. The saint had finally been bled. But I didn't celebrate. I sat in the rocker beside Noah's crib, the bracelet resting in my palm. He stirred once, his hand twitching in his sleep. "You don't fight with noise, kiddo," I whispered. "You fight by standing." The bracelet caught the last bit of streetlight outside and shone like a thing newly forged, not old and worn. I set it gently on the windowsill. My phone buzzed again. Another message. Unknown number. "He's missing." My stomach dropped. Not because I didn't know who, but because deep down, I'd been waiting for the moment silence turned into something else. And now, it had. Rhett was gone. Not arrested. Not exposed in a dramatic takedown. He just vanished. 2 weeks had passed since the ceremony. The media flurry faded as quickly as it came. A hospital spokesperson confirmed Rhett's resignation, then refused to comment further. Jenna's Instagram went blank, her last post a silent black square. Somewhere, people were speculating, whispering, asking questions. But I didn't. I didn't need answers. I didn't want them. That part of the story, his part, had reached its ending. Mine had just begun again, in quieter rooms, with softer sounds. Noah was finally home. Each morning started the same way now. A stretch, the creak of floorboards under my bare feet, the faint gurgle from the nursery, and the softest cry, almost like an apology for waking me. The cold of January still lingered outside, but inside, warmth returned in pieces, in breath, in weight, in the little heartbeat I could now hear without monitors. This morning, sunlight finally touched the curtains. Not just gray daylight, but real light, the kind that makes you blink. I stepped into the nursery, rubbing my eyes, and saw him looking back at me with those same eyes Maeve had. Wide, curious, alive. I walked to the crib, leaned over, and gently pulled back the blanket to change him. That's when I saw it. A small, cream-colored envelope, sealed, tucked in the corner near the headboard. Noah cooed. I frowned, picked it up. The handwriting was unfamiliar. Not Jenna's polished cursive, not the hospital's print. But the initials on the back stopped me cold. RD. I looked around the room, as if the walls could offer an explanation. The door was locked overnight. No one had come in. I was sure of that. I sat on the floor, cross-legged, Noah bundled on my lap, and opened the envelope. No date, no greeting, just a few lines. "I did wrong, Silas. I wanted to be seen the way you always were. Steady, decent, loved. I thought I could take that. You were never weak. You just didn't fight dirty. I hope someday you tell Noah the truth. Not about me, but about you." Rhett, I read it again and again. Not forgiveness. Not even an apology, really. Just a crack in the wall he'd built around his shame. A man who'd finally run out of room to hide, and left this instead of himself. I folded the letter slowly, smoothing its edges, then looked down at Noah. He blinked up at me, peaceful. "He already knows," I whispered, because he did. That afternoon, I drove out to the cemetery. No music, no rush, just the rhythm of the road and the sound of my breath. The same folding chair from Maeve's funeral was still in my trunk. I'd kept it for some reason. Maybe to return, maybe to forget. Today, I pulled it out, unfolded it, and set it next to her headstone. I sat down, the cold metal creaking beneath me, and placed the letter on my lap. "I got something," I said aloud. "From him." The wind picked up slightly, brushing across the trees above us. Not harsh, just enough to remind me winter wasn't done, but it was loosening its grip. I read the letter to her. Every word, every line. No tears came. Just a long breath at the end, the kind that feels like it's been waiting years to leave. I didn't win, I said softly. I just stopped losing. I let the silence settle after that. No epiphanies, no ghosts, just wind and stone and memory. Around my neck, the NICU bracelet hung on a simple leather cord. I'd worn it every day since the ceremony. It didn't hurt anymore. It grounded me. What once reminded me of everything I lost now reminded me of everything I still carried. That night, Noah stirred just after 10. I rocked him gently, the nursery dim with only the hallway light bleeding in. As I laid him back down, I reached into my pocket and pulled out the folded letter. I placed it beside the crib's corner. Then I took the bracelet from around my neck and set it next to the letter, where the morning sun might hit it again. One day, I said, leaning over him, when you ask about your mother, I'll tell you everything. Not the pain, but the strength. He yawned, tiny arms stretching. I turned off the light and stood for a moment in the doorway. The bracelet caught a final glint of light, and then only stillness. The next morning, I carried Noah outside, bundled against the lingering chill. The sky was finally clear. No haze, no weight in the air. Just light. Simple, real, bright. I looked at the horizon, then down at my son. He blinked slowly, his cheeks flushed with warmth. Some prayers, I said, mostly to myself, aren't answered by voices. I kissed the top of his head. They're answered by survival. And we stood there, facing the sun, unafraid,